Hello, everybody. Hello, and welcome. On behalf of everyone at Toptal, thank you for being here. We have an exciting evening in store for everyone. In just a few minutes' time, we'll begin our panel discussion with several notable industry leaders whose expertise and insights into the realm that we call the future of work proved to be enlightening. In 2010, Toptal was born out of a desire and a need to enable businesses to easily identify and engage with great talent from around the world, regardless of geography. 7 years and many thousands of customers later, Toptal is doing just that, delivering the world's top talent on demand via a highly vetted and curated network of experts in multiple disciplines, from technology and engineering to finance and design. It's my pleasure to introduce the primary architect of that vision, Toptal's co-founder and CEO, Taso Du Val.
For coming today. We have spent so much time putting this panel together and this event at large. We have some excellent speakers and individuals who are going to participate within this panel. We're super excited to be able to put this on for everybody. I wanted to really hit on two things. One is where Toptal is today and where it's going, and some of the things that we're empirically doing at Toptal. So the first is that where we are. As a company, we are the second largest talent marketplace in the world by revenue if you were to consider us a talent marketplace. Now, we actually don't consider ourselves a talent marketplace. We consider ourselves an on-demand service. We just happen to be working within the talent industry. We supply high-skilled labor to people, companies, and enterprises all over the world at an on-demand level. So we're very happy to continue that. And one thing that we're doing to sort of work more within the enterprise is release more thought leadership, content, and strategic advice to enterprises, Fortune 500s, and companies of the like, to be able to allow them to get the insights that they're looking for, to be able to leverage distributed teams, blended workforces, and different types of innovative labor practices. So today we're launching Toptal Insights, which you could think of as somewhat of a McKinsey quarterly, but really for the talent industry. And what we're looking to bring to light is how the most innovative companies are leveraging different types of blended workforces, distributed teams, freelancers, all sorts of different innovative models that enterprises and Fortune 500s are using to be able to make their businesses more powerful and move the needle. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our panel, and most notably, Charlene Li, our moderator, New York Times bestselling author, and principal at Altimer.
All right, Taso, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm going to have the panel come up with us too. And for all of you who are standing, there are plenty of seats, so make yourself comfortable. We're going to have a little conversation here for the next hour or so. All right. So I'm going to start up with a few comments about what I'm seeing in the industry, and then we'll hand it over to the panelists. So as Taso was mentioning, I am an analyst. I'm an author. I have been looking at the role of technology and business and strategy all coming together. But at the very beginning, I am a strategist. And I was an analyst at Forrester for 10 years, started my own firm, and then recently sold it to Profit Brand Strategy. And now I'm a very happy employee, I have to say, because the culture is fantastic, but I continue to write and research. And one of the most interesting things that I have found across the research over all these years is that the technologies come and go. They are constantly shifting. And I was speaking with Nelson right before this, and I go, you know, it just dawned on me that when I came out of college, the brand new technology was the fax machine. There was no email. There was no email when I came out of college. And kind of dates me, but it also kind of gives you an idea how much has the world changed? How has work really differed? And to give you another idea, we had no PowerPoint. We didn't have laptops. We had acetates. Do you guys know what acetates are for slides? We had these like clear pieces of plastic that you put onto a projector and then broadcast it onto the screen. I mean, this is antiquated technology. So the reason I say this is that the challenges of that environment that I was in there are very much similar to the challenges we have today. With all these new technologies coming in, the fax machine, email, now we have social and mobile and cloud, and even today we are dealing with artificial intelligence. These technologies will continue to wash over us as organizations, as leaders. And the key challenge here is how do you maintain and define what that relationship looks like? Make no mistake, the future work isn't just about the technology. It is about the relationships between the bonds that we have, between the leaders who aspire to lead organizations to do audacious things, and the people who are inspired to follow them. And that relationship has always been in a contractual bond of employees. But as we know from our social media experiences, followers are no longer defined by titles or contracts or even any sort of physical contact. People can become part of your cause, become part of your movement as an organization simply because they believe. So this is a very different type of environment now about the future of work. Who truly is an employee? Who is a part of your organization and trying to help you achieve these audacious goals? Where do contractors and gig workers and partners, supply chain, even your customers, how are they a part of this future of what we call work? So we're going to be exploring this in a couple different directions. And the context that I want to explore this today is really how do we prepare for this new future that's unknown, where relationships are going to be crafted and created in many different ways. We have challenges of people we never see, we never meet. So we have distance as a challenge. We have time as a challenge in working across multiple time zones and global locations. And then we also have differences around how we actually communicate and collaborate. How do we become more connected and in deeper relationship with each other in a fast-changing world? So I'm going to turn it over to the panel at this point, and I'm going to ask them to quickly introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the questions. All right, Bracken.
I'm Bracken Darrell. I'm the CEO of Logitech. If you have a mouse or keyboard on your desk somewhere, it's probably ours. I hope so. But we're doing a lot more than that. And I've been the CEO for about 4 years.
Hi, Courtney Abraham. I'm the SVP of Talent Management with the Adecco Group. Many of you probably know one of our brands, Adecco. So we are the parent company and one of the largest workforce solution providers, putting people back to work and increasing employability around the world.
I'm Sri Viswanath. I'm the CTO of Atlassian. Atlassian's mission is to unleash potential on teams. So every topic that Charlene mentioned is what we build tools for. So I'm super excited to be here and look forward to an awesome conversation.
Hello, everybody. I'm Maja Vujinovic. I'm a CIO of New Technologies and Future Work at GE. I think everybody's heard of GE. I think one interesting thing is that not a lot of people know that GE builds software. So that's a pretty cool thing.
And I am Taso Du Val, the CEO of Toptal.
Okay, great. So I'm going to put a pretty general question to the panel, which is what are the biggest trends impacting work today that are going to create challenges, and what are those challenges that you face? So what are the trends that's impacting work, will prepare you for the future, and what are the challenges around those trends that they present? So Bracken.
Okay, I'll go first. I think especially if you live in this part of the world, but really if you live anywhere in the world, with options like Toptal or options like the explosion of new employment models, I think you have to realize you're running an all-volunteer army, and and if you're running an all-volunteer army, then you've got to be extremely attractive. One way people do it here in Silicon Valley is you have a lot of free food, and a lot of free stuff, and you have a place to sleep, and and I don't know what the answer is, but I think for us the answer is it's got to be really exciting and fun, and so for us we've just defined ourselves as we're a humble company. We're the mouse company. How can we not be humble? So we're a humble company. Nobody there thinks they're better than anybody else. We're extremely flat. We're totally open office, which is the big mega trend here. But we're more than open office. We're kind of anti-hierarchy, anti-titles, anti-all the bureaucracy and terrible stuff in the big companies that I grew up in. And no offense, because I grew up in GE, and I'm sure GE's changing. But at GE and P&G. But we're really trying to be more about complete informality, and getting all the bullshit out of the way and just doing things that are worth doing.
So since you picked on me, I'll pick back. No, no. I think I love one of the things you said is we've tried this whole new free food thing in GE, right? Because this didn't necessarily, it existed in different forms, but in our new offices in Boston, where our headquarters is now, and then in New York, we serve free food and just really, really healthy food on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. And it's quite interesting. We picked it up from Silicon Valley to say, will this attract then the best talent in some way, shape, or form, right?
Long drive.
And it's quite interesting that we didn't see a rise of talent, although I have some of my colleagues here from HR, Heather, that can speak to that a little bit more. But I think what we did see is a relaxed environment. It's more that connection, human connection, Charlene, that you alluded to, that then inspired creativity, because people would huddle around that food to discuss a problem. So that was quite interesting. And to answer the question on challenges, I think one of the things that I see in GE is that, I mean, we really, when you look at our industries, aviation and transportation and healthcare and power, we really truly try to solve some of the world's biggest problems. And we can't anticipate the need and the gaps in the market and talent as fast as this is happening. I think that's one of our biggest challenges.
So the speed of the change.
Absolutely. And the market transformation and the need, it's not anymore copy-paste in certain markets. It's really, you have to go local, deep to understand what not just the whole Nigeria needs, but what parts of Nigeria need. And that might also differ in talent as well.
Well, and I'll jump in if I may.
Please.
It's employability for us, right? So we have young graduates who are coming out of the institutions, universities, and colleges by hordes, and many of them don't have ready technical skills to be able to place jobs. We are creating thinkers, and we are creating innovators, and new pop-up companies are just, it's amazing the pace, and some of you actually may have started them. It's outstanding. But what we are finding is that IQ will get you the job, but EQ will get you kicked out the door, right? So the emotional intelligence piece and the lack of emotional intelligence is one of the things that we are finding we are constantly investing in coaching and just regular conversations of a manager who has a brand new team and perhaps has been managing, you know, a baby boomer workforce, and now they have a slew of Gen X and millennials working for them, and it's just different. And so we're trying to teach both the new incoming class, right, into the workforce of what does it mean to be emotionally intelligent, and to understand that, you know what, in this moment, I'm getting a little bit heated and I'm turning red and I want to stamp my feet on the ground and I want to absolutely cuss you out, but I can't because there are implications of that. And so it's just an ongoing coaching conversation that I think we're pretty much faced with too.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll go next. So we talked about casual culture and food. Let me cover that first. I went to office today without this jacket, like t-shirt, jeans, and I was wearing the formal shoes. And one of my fellow employees says, "Sri, you're in formals." That's how casual we are. And on food, it's important, and the reason I bring up food is because I like this quote which says, "Culture eats strategy for lunch."
Yep.
Right? So culture is the most important thing, and as I look towards, and we'll cover probably more on culture, but as I look to companies that have succeeded in building out, they have a very strong foundation in culture. And we think a lot about, and we are an Australian company, and Australia has its culture in terms of being chill and cool and people-friendly, and that's how we have grown up as a company. And we think a lot about how do we build that strong culture, and even the tools that we build needs to help out to organize the teams. And teams are becoming smaller and more distributed, and culture is becoming even more important as it becomes distributed culture. Right, so that's something that we think a lot about.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So Courtney hit on EQ, you hit on culture, and I'll just say IQ does not dictate culture, EQ does. And when you look at that from a distributed model, you have to understand the people who you're working with and the EQ component even more so, because there are people who will go in chat rooms and cause a ruckus and do the things that are what we consider against remote etiquette or working remotely, and the etiquette that goes along with it. And that is a really important component, and you now see companies, and we're working on this as well, that work to screen out really all of the sort of nuances within the EQ realm to allow people to not only integrate into a company and say, I understand the code base, I can get up to speed with what you're doing, but they're also good fits from an EQ perspective. And there's a lot of work in the screening realm, in the different sort of talent company realm that are working on these areas.
So let's go deep into this whole idea of managing people who are not in a core office. And probably many companies here have people who, maybe one or two people who work remotely, maybe entire teams, or just globally, just completely distributed. That's becoming the norm rather than the exception. What are some best practices you found? What makes this work? What doesn't make it work?
I'll jump in a couple. So we're a super, super global company. We're 35 years old, and we're literally in every country in the world almost, and and we have so many offices and so many people distributed around the world. We also have very sizable offices in about 10 different places in the world where we have designers, engineers, product people, marketing people. So we have a couple things. So one, we've learned the hard way, because we screwed it up so many times, that if we include more than 2 time zones in a project team, we're in trouble, because it's just if the time zones are more than, say, the U.S. apart, it just it's impossible, because you end up slowing everything down. There's so much redundancy. So that's one very practical lesson we learned. And the other one that I feel really strongly about is the power of video. Mm-hmm. I think it's amazing, because my daughter went to work for a company. Okay, now I'm going to get myself and my daughter in trouble. My daughter went to work for a company recently that uses a lot of phone calls, traditional phone calls. And it's amazing the difference between video and phone. Video solves a lot of the EQ problems. Yep. It's amazing the difference. It feels so much more political when you're on an audio call than it was when you're in a video call. A video call is transparent. When you're on an audio call, you can be on your email. You can be rolling your eyes because somebody said something really stupid. So it's just a different game.
So we have a unique case. We bought this company called Trello recently, and Trello does project management software. And they're based in New York, but not really, right? So 60% of their company works from home, right? It's a 100% or so company. 60 of them work from home. So they've actually developed an amazing set of best practices in-house. Just to give you some examples, when you do an all hands, like in New York, they all go back to their desks and dial into the video. Right? And that's for a very specific reason. They want to make sure that everybody in the office, the 40 people that are in New York, and everybody feels like they are in a level field. Right? Otherwise, what happens is you have these 40 people who are talking to each other, and then the remote people don't have the say in it. Yeah. They've built this where everything is remote. And their practices is they chat only, even they don't have this water cooler culture. They all do it on a chat system, right? So there's definitely that. They also have this working culture. Wherever you are in the world, there is a 4-hour overlap with New York that you have to work in. Right? That's your choice, that you are in a time zone that's way off, but the requirement when you join the company is 12 to 4 New York time. You have to be online so that you can actually connect. And when somebody joins the company, even they're working from home, their entire team, the small team, let's say 4-people team that they're working, they all fly to New York and spend a week together. And then they go back to their teams. And lastly, they also do a all-hands offsite every year where they bring in all the 100 people into one location, so they all get to bond with each other. Fascinating.
Very cool.
I think I found in GE we use WebEx, we use telepresence, we use Yammer, we use everything possible that we can to chat and increase the speed and efficiency of communication. And telepresence, for sure, I demand it in all my meetings, for example. And yes, I would like to have everybody dial in from their own computer, but sometimes that's not possible. I do agree with you, absolutely. GE is a very global company, and not only are we global in over 100 countries in the world, but we have deep roots in some of the countries, right? So some of the folks that have been working at GE have been there for a number of years, and so we have to deal with cultural barriers and ethnic barriers and religious barriers. And some people don't want to get on a TP, right? They don't feel comfortable getting on a TP, and it's quite interesting to see that dynamic. I think one more important thing that, as I'm hearing you talk, is thinking of number of things in GE is more and more, and I think you see it particularly, right? More flexible talent. Talent is just, I mean, as it says, right? It's a fluid talent. It's a online talent. People are demanding flexibility, choice, opportunities. And if you don't have a good leader that communicates with the very high EQ, I don't care what you have. TP, WebEx, presence, like whatever it is, it simply doesn't work. I think that leadership as an ability to solve problems in a room versus picking up the phone and solving a problem with somebody, I'm seeing it more and more in GE, that it actually yields success versus doesn't. And that human connection, you know, as we think about technology and the rise of technology, to Charlene's point earlier, yeah, you've got technology and that's not stopping. But where the connections are is that human capability and ability to resolve a problem and drain value out of that employee in the best way possible by providing them to shine, right? So.
Yeah, to what Sri said about having the teams being remote and in sync versus sometimes disconnected. I mean, we see this time and time again. And just as a sort of side note, so if you look at our company internally, we're the second largest distributed company in the entire world. So the only company that's larger than ours as an internal operation is WordPress. And so we have a lot of infrastructure and policy and ways to keep people in sync. We record videos in case people miss it, and they could recap it, et cetera. Right. Where we see people faltering is when they hire a remote team or when they hire somebody outside of the office and they're not in sync with that team. And they say, well, the freelancer, the person outside didn't work. Does your company have the infrastructure to support those types of individuals integrating into the environment? Because that is the most critical piece, and it is really a piece of infrastructure. It's policy, it's technology, it's process. You can allow a company to exist that can thrive with remote distributed teams. It's just about getting all those components in place rather than saying, well, it was that person's fault, et cetera. And so we see a lot of this. And as a completely distributed company, we have a lot of different components in place, and I can tell you it works out so well.
Well, and it's one of the future competencies, right? So managing a distributed workforce, 10 years ago it was managing virtual teams. Now it's managing global teams. So if we have the infrastructure and the tools to support it, so it can be a face-to-face conversation where everyone's dialing in and they feel like they're in it and they have the policies to support, it still comes back to basic management principles. It's active listening. It's taking time to build a connection. It's once a year getting on a plane so that we can have a personal relationship and make it a little bit more human. So I think it ties it nicely, but we can't forget, in all honesty, that it begins and it fails with us as human beings, right? Human behavior kills everything.
Or builds everything.
Or
Sri, go ahead.
Ideally.
What Taso said resonates with me because we bought Trello, but Atlassian was not like that, right? We had some remote people, but not really a fully remote culture. So our challenge was to figure out how to integrate them, but still not, we can have all Atlassians go remote. We can't have everybody dialing into we have our own video technology as part of HipChat, but we can't support 2,000 people dialing into an all hands every single time. So what we did was we made remote as a first-class citizen, right? When we call out different locations that we have, we explicitly call out every single time that remote is a location, right? And that has worked out extremely well for us.
That's very cool.
I want to just capstone this last part about culture and then keep moving on. Because I think culture, I love that thing about culture eats strategy. I say for breakfast every single day.
All right, for breakfast.
Because it's the thing that you wake up with. You don't wake up thinking about strategy, although we should. The first thing you go to is culture. And so if culture is not there to support the strategy will never happen. But in our research, what we find is that culture is the whole set of process and governance and symbols and rituals and stories. There's so many aspects of this. And we don't put enough time and thought into how that works. And the second thing is we're looking at how technology is actively being used to shape what culture looks like. So taking a very strategic view, I think, is what the future work is going to absolutely require, because in order, I think, to to your point about how do you keep up? How do you keep up with this anticipated change? The only way you can do that is to know that you're going to have to constantly rework your culture, which means reworking all of those processes. They will absolutely change. All right. I want to go and talk a little bit about leadership, which is a sort of flip side of the coin from culture. Oftentimes, we all think about ourselves as leaders, but we also think about the leaders you have to foster and develop in this future. What are the biggest challenges? What will leadership look like? And how are you beginning to think about this? And we have a lot of leaders here, so Bracken, go for it.
Well, it's so exciting to have that topic be talked about right now in this room, because I think the future of companies like GE and like Logitech, little Logitech, and Amazon and every startup that's represented in this room is the same, which is everybody. There's no way that big companies will be successful in a world where technology can create, where 8 people can create something so amazing if they don't disintegrate into smaller and smaller teams, which means more and more leaders. So this is the most exciting time to talk about leadership there's ever been. And I don't think it could be, it can't be overstated how important it is to figure out how to do that. And none of us have the answers, but it's an incredibly exciting time.
Just a show of hands in the room. How many people here are leaders? Just raise your hand really high. How many are leaders?
Wow.
I hope everybody raises
You know, every hand should be up, right?
Yeah.
Right,
This
leadership
new
as
word
a
is a trick
behavior.
question, right? But every hand should be up. So how do we foster that everybody raising their hand up in an organization? And also, how do you get leaders to follow at the right moment?
I'm going to jump in.
Yeah, go for it.
Leadership is a behavior. It's not a role, right? You don't get a title and all of a sudden you become a leader. You're a manager, and you're a manager of processes and tools and people and things. Leadership is how do you motivate and inspire? How do you bring people with you? How do you create followership? And it's, I have a friend that loves to say, I don't work for anyone and no one works for me. I'm with them. They're with me. And I love that, because what it says is that leader is in it with them and know that they may be the boss on paper, but they certainly don't show up on a daily basis acting as an authoritative, dominating figurehead. They're collaborating and they're trusting and they're asking for ideas and sharing. So I think it's how we embody our behaviors and what we bring to the workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the thing. Definition of leadership that was like 10 years ago is different from what it is or what it should be going forward, right? Bottoms up, being much more open, making sure innovation is, the voices of everybody is heard, because everybody is a leader. And teams are becoming smaller, we have more leaders. And also one thing that's hard for people to realize is people keep saying, there is change, there's going to be change, so you should be good at change management. The one thing people don't realize is change is not constant, change is actually accelerating, right? So that's a very important thing. If you are good with change and you're able to keep up, you won't be able to keep up because the change is only going faster, right? Software that was changing every 18 months is now changing every week, it's changing every day, it's changing all the time. So as management principles, there's a whole bunch of things that you need to be changing and changing faster to be able to adapt and grow your organization.
I like what Courtney was saying. I sit kind of in this world in between being an entrepreneur all my life and then in private equity and emerging markets. Coming into GE was the only massive big company that I've ever worked for, and I had to adapt how to really understand why is it that there are certain things at GE, principle and rigor, and the whole concept of Six Sigma, right? And this whole notion of what got you here won't get you further, I'm not sure that I completely agree with that, because there are areas of our work, such as, let's say, aviation, that is heavily regulated, and we can't have people that are just going to be walking in however and, having random creative chats. I mean, there are certain rules and regulations that you have to follow, and you have to be rigorous about your work, because you're responsible for millions of people that are flying the planes. And so So I think for me it was quite interesting to, I don't behave nothing like a traditional leader, actually quite opposite. I never wear heels in the office. I'm always in my tennis shoes. I even brought them here to walk later. But it's because, and most of the folks in my office don't see me that way. So it's a little bit of a disconnect at GE when I walk into a room with my CEO and I'm wearing my All-Stars, right? I mean, I do get a second look, but it is the type of change that I'm trying to promote, that we need to be comfortable, right, while we're doing these things. I don't have to look a certain way, and that takes courage, and that takes encouraging other people. And most of my work is spent championing some of the most incredible minds that I've ever met, which work at GE, engineers. And we don't have necessarily a very hard time at attracting talent, because we have some enormous, massive problems to solve, right, in the world. So from an engineering perspective, we get a lot of talent. But I think it's quite interesting that I have to continuously give him that courage and championship to say, you're doing this. This is your work, and you need to present it. This could change the world. This could change this business model. And that's a big part of my work. It is certainly never actually about me, to Courtney's point. It is always about people I work with.
And if you talk about, I mean, it was process that was discussed here in leadership, combining those two, really at Toptal, what we do so well is we have a process for educating everyone what we do. And we don't have a different process for people who are on site or remote. It's just the same process across the board. And what we see so helpful is having freelancers come in or remote people come in, whether we meet them in person or they're remote or however it ends up happening. It's very consistent, and everybody has the same onboarding process. And what we see is the processes for distributed teams or blended workforces are often sort of front-loaded for the on-site employees, and they're neglected for those types of folks. And so they don't integrate in the same way, and again, it goes back to blaming the freelancer, or blaming the contractor, or the outsourcing company that you may be working with. It's important to get a process in place so that full integration can happen regardless of the type of worker that you're bringing on board. That is so critically important. A second component about trust and really being a or a leader in this day and age is really goes back to the video part. We ran Toptal up to about 300 employees with almost no video. And I could say that the day we introduced video, everybody trusted me so much more. It was like I just started existing that same day. And I was like, okay. And they're like, wow, people are really talking about how they loved your all-hands meeting and everything. I'm like, well, I've done that before, and it was the same words and, quarterly update, et cetera. But me sort of sitting in my house, everyone realizes I'm a human. They can connect with me. I was talking about probably, I don't know, I think I mentioned what I did over the weekend or something.
Your dog walks in.
Exactly, right? It was a very human experience for them. And so you start losing those human experiences because you're a distributed team and you don't see each other face to face, and they start questioning it. I think it's just subconsciously, what is this person thinking? What are they doing? And when they don't see it, there's this subconscious reaction to, I don't know what they're doing, but the moment they see you, they feel much more comfortable. And it's really this cadence of instilling trust, doing that through processes, having those processes be uniform, and doing it in the most vivid and deep way possible. Today, I believe video is probably the most poignant way to do it. In offices, you have different types of solutions. Cisco has some excellent solutions with their telepresence and whatnot. But those notions of uniformity and consistency across process and across communication is so important for getting everybody, especially the different types of workers, on the same page.
I want to dig down a little bit deeper into how do you actually processize, if you want to, if that's a word, leadership and the development of that and the sense. And Courtney, you mentioned one of my favorite concepts, which is followership. I don't think many people have heard of that, which is the flip side of leadership. Want to just explain what that is? And then how do you foster that? How do you create a process to develop leadership and followership.
Well, and I think it's interesting when you look at any company, regardless of if you're a 4-person operation or a 400 or 30,000, 300,000 operation, what are the skills and competencies that will take you to the future? So whatever your business goals are, do you have the talent that is able to fulfill those business goals? And as you said, with the acceleration of change, we have to be thinking 3 steps ahead. So the leader is often the next person who happens to be at the table or in the room, and it's knowing there's no ego, right? So being able to create followership is that, you know what? Everybody has a voice, and everybody has a good idea. It doesn't need to be mine because I am the key person who writes the check. It is the ability to latch onto an idea, to instill trust in that person. And you know what? Things go wrong. So when people make mistakes, it doesn't matter. As long as we dust ourselves off and we learn from them, and that hopefully we're not making the same mistakes over time. And then really latching onto those stories to say, you know what, Sally Jane or whomever it was did this with this idea, with this team. These 3 things blew up, but you know what? She created revenue, and it's going to take us to the future. So just creating those stories and making that the forefront, not the greatest strategy that we just built. Yeah.
Let me I hadn't thought about this before, but you made me think of it, which is, maybe the biggest disservice we've done to leadership is giving it a name, because the thing that makes great leaders is the same thing that makes great followers, is the same thing that makes great performers. It's just follow through, empathy, listening, humility, hard work, caring about whether you get it done, feeling of ownership. It doesn't matter whether you're a leader or a follower, it's everybody. And I think, by defining it as leadership, we probably do it an enormous disservice. I mean, we really probably should just park that word and talk about great performance or great team work.
Yeah, so we build tools for making teams effective, which means we strongly believe as a company to make sure that each team is autonomous, and any team that works and uses our product can have a level playing field and can voice their opinion. So just to give an example, we built this tool, Confluence, which is for document management. And by default, it's open, right? When you create a page, it's available for everybody, right? And open company, no bullshit is one of our values as a culture. And we live it on a everyday basis, right? It's insane how much open we are as a company, as a public company, but we are. Right, so everybody is an insider in the company. We make sure that we have weekly all-staff where we answer every single question. There's a bunch of things that we do.
That's interesting.
And that translates into our products where we make it all open for our customers to also be like that and enable the followership that you...
If I could just quickly add to that, it's interesting. I had Jeff Weiner, the CEO of LinkedIn. He and I did a fireside chat about 2 months ago. When they went, it's one of the same things they did, but they said, I don't care if we're public or private, we're going to have everybody's an insider, total transparency, doesn't matter. We're not, by the way. We're not like that. We've been a public company for 30 years, but we should be. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah. Some of the fastest moving companies have, the default is open, and you pull things back that have to be private. And some companies that I work with, very large organizations sometimes, and when they're trying to shift the culture, one of the first things they do is put in some of these collaboration networks and messaging and things to create greater transparency. And the reason is because transparency creates accountability. And it is the maxim that I have heard over and over again of the reason why you put in these collaboration platforms. It isn't to be more efficient, to create more connections, it's to create transparency. So the activities that you do right from the very beginning, when you think about how do we actively change the relationship and the way people work with each other, which is the foundation for culture, it is about creating greater transparency, because transparency creates trust. And trust is what makes relationships work. One other thing, and then we're going to go into a speed round of some fun stuff here. When it comes to this followership, there's this wonderful author back in the 80s, Robert Kellerman, and he talked about this whole idea of fellowship, right, which is the relationship between leaders and followers, and how do you nurture that relationship. There's a statistic from Gallup that showed, depending on the market that you're in, between 13 and 30% of employees are engaged. That means a waste of people who are coming to work every day just punching the clock. They're not coming in engaged. And I think the reason why fundamentally is that employers don't want engaged employees. Because this is what an engaged employee looks like. Hey, you know that, Bracken, I love the idea of the strategy. I think we're doing it wrong. I think we should do it a different way. And I have 10 ideas that I want to talk to you about. That's what an engaged employee looks like. And most managers, to your point, they're not leaders, say, please go back to your desk and do your job. We don't actually want engaged employees. So this idea of what that relationship is going to look like in a highly distributed workforce in the future, where people can't turn to you and just go like, hey, good to see you every day in the morning. We walk into work together, we drive the same way. We don't have that connective tissue. So the focus on that relationship is going to be absolutely key. I want to do a fun run with technology now, because it is what the future will work. We live here in Silicon Valley, work here, our mindset is here. So I'm going to talk about a technology and just speed run, like how do you think this is going to impact the future of work? All right. So my first one is virtual reality. Does it have an impact on the future of work? Is it a buzzword, bright, shiny object? How real is it? Should we be thinking about it?
I would say if you replace virtual with augmented, it's going to have a big impact. It's going to have a big impact on productivity. It's going to make things easier. It's going to make Taso be more trustworthy to more people more of the time earlier, because it's going to be affordable and it's going to be everywhere.
I can dress how they like.
Exactly. So I'll stop there.
It's an interesting filter. Yes, the
Said
suit
light,
filter, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Anybody else want to take that on?
Yeah, absolutely. We believe in AR. Like VR, AR goes together in terms of how it is. Like any other technology, I think it's going to be a lot more prevalent for the first several years in the consumer land, like gaming and just retail and e-commerce and other places. But it will creep into the offices, right? Just like how other technologies did that, absolutely will be part of it, like 5 to 10 years from now.
Yeah. Well, and I have seen it used from a training perspective pretty effectively. So from a technical skill building of putting your hands on something and assembling something or moving through an assembly line, I've actually seen really great cases where people don't have to go on site, but they can use the augmented or virtual reality to learn those skills at a pretty high precision rate.
Yeah, if you haven't played with it, you should absolutely play. We have a VR lab in our office. It's fascinating to see. You bring kids in there, bring adults, like 3 seconds later, they're like painting in the air. It's so amazing to play, but it's still there. It hasn't gotten into the work.
Right, it's very consumer-oriented, right? And so the question becomes, from a training perspective, and are any of you actively doing anything in the space to develop that in your workplace today, or see, or think about over the next year or two that you're going to do that?
I think at GE, we use it all across our businesses.
Yes.
I mean, for VR, AR, we're really into that space, and that's very important for us. And I think when it comes to training, we do a lot of skills training, be it in various countries in the world, and we're looking at that space. We're also doing it in healthcare, oil and gas, advanced manufacturing, so everywhere. Absolutely.
I actually had a meeting this morning with someone who is leading a practice at a large airline as a consultant, really building out the practice with the airline, to do AR and VR training with engine repair. And engine repair has thousands of parts that you have to move around, and it's extremely expensive because a lot of the time they're actually having you work on the actual engine. And to save that time, to save that cost, and to be able to do it even in your own home, to repair an engine virtually through AR or VR, it's unmatched to anything in terms of cost saving and effectiveness. We are going to have eventually a Slack for AR, a Slack for VR, where it's going to allow distributed teams to connect even more so, as Bracken was saying, for the teams at large in a very quick, consumer yet company-focused manner. And that's going to happen, I would say, within the next 5 or 10 years. I think anybody here who's used AR or VR conjure up an idea that you could see pretty clearly how this could work. Instead of you looking at you and your background in your dining room, it's an office. And you don't have to sort of tidy your home and do all these things that a lot of people think of as remote etiquette, to be able to work at home and be on video and all this sort of funny stuff. it's really going to make a big impact, and I think it's going to be the future.
I think to add on this, another example, at GE we have obviously Predix, which is our software platform, and we've created a digital asset twin. What meaning of that is that you actually have a physical asset and a twin of that physical asset on the cloud onto which you can run predictive analytics to see where you could have potential failures and repairs, which goes to exactly what you're saying. We can actually predict where you're going to have that, and that is a massive cost saving to our customers.
Yeah, there's promise for the future, but the platform that can unleash, get us to the tipping point is not there yet. It's as soon as, think about 10 years ago, or whenever iPhone came in, everything before that, we had mobile, there were mobile apps, but when iPhone came in and Android came in, it just democratized the building of those apps. That's going to happen for VR, AR, and that's going to change how we build apps across the board.
I think there's one interesting point, Charlene, you were hitting on earlier, which I like what Sri was saying, is so if I look at right now, we're doing small pilots in blockchain and lead our blockchain development across the company, and that's one of the protocols that folks are right now putting a lot of faith into and saying, you know, this might be connecting us and might be moving value faster, right, than the protocols that we have at the moment. And so we've had very difficult time at GE to get leadership on board to just buy into piloting and figuring out pilot cases just for us to test this, because it's the culture of processes, PowerPoints. We have to have it proven somewhere before we do something, right? There wasn't that necessarily agility to do something really fast and to develop a POC and run it without processes, right? Without PowerPoints, just to assemble a team in a room and say, can we do this?
Yeah.
How do you run the two-pizza rule for teams, right?
That's
to
right.
have greater speed and agility. The other technology I want to talk on, then we'll open it up for questions from the audience, is artificial intelligence. Big, huge area. And two options to take a look at that is how you're going to get more data out of the enterprise to be able to make decisions better and faster. And then the other one is I'm fascinated by the opportunities to take bots into the organizations, just to answer and get information more into the hands of people faster. So what are you seeing? What are you trying to develop and investing time and energy into?
Well, we're like, there are probably lots of people in the room working on machine learning in some way, shape, or form. You know, in our business, we're in about 22 different categories, 4 different brands, and in some of our categories, we're doing machine learning or deep learning, even really video deep learning. Others, I sort of think the future is you're going to be able to basically buy this. In fact, you can now from IBM or Google or Microsoft, or so you can be able to download it. And I think that in terms of the future of work, it's really interesting. I think a lot of the companies that are deepest into artificial intelligence already are going to turn that right back and make it available for everybody else. And I think there's this strange combination of things, which at one level you've got, honestly, unless you work for Google, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, you couldn't possibly invest enough to build the level of machine learning they're going to have in some areas. On the other hand, they're just simply not going to build the customization that could help you within your specific area, maybe within your enterprise, maybe for your customer base, that you'll want to do. So you kind of have to live on both these ends of the spectrum, and that's probably why there are more and more machine learning companies being formed right now, and it's incredibly exciting, I have to say.
Yeah,
Courtney.
Go ahead.
I think people are scared a little bit, right? So from an employment perspective, that's the big thing that always is in the newspaper of, well, don't go too fast because you're going to replace my job. Sure, some of the things perhaps will be replaced, but we're going to be better for it, because think about the freedom we will have and the space we will have to be even more creative, because that learning will be done for us. So then it takes our creativity and our intelligence to the next level. So I think it's actually really freeing and really exciting to see what happens. From an HR professional perspective, it's something like 40% of an HR person's job, from a transactional, make sure you get your paycheck and some of the other benefit components, absolutely can go this way. Thank God, right? You want your benefits to work when you go to the doctor, and you want your paycheck to show up in your bank account. I think those are all freeing things so that we can focus on much more important things about, do we have the talent to achieve our business goals?
Absolutely. And this is a fascinating field. I want to spend the next 1 hour talking about this because it's going to change how we do things. Just if you look just 3 years from now, 5 years from now, every product that you use today will be a learning system, right? There's lots of data out there, right? Many of these products are not using it. So we collect lots and lots of data that we can make our products a lot more learning, and we are working towards making our products a lot more smarter, right? That's one step of the way. If you zoom forward 10 years from now, or however it happens, there's going to be insane number of jobs lost, going back to your point, but that's a good thing. Because it'll also generate an insane more number of jobs that are different from what it is today, right? If you look at a spectrum of, we think about this a lot because we want to unleash potential of teams. In the future, there'll be teams that will consist of robots in there. So how do humans and robots work together? It's fascinating. And the way I describe it is if you think about the spectrum of efficiency to effectiveness, if your company or any job that you're doing is trying to optimize for efficiency, that job is going to go away because robots and bots and machines are going to do that so much better. On the other end of the spectrum, being effective, that includes empathy, humanization, making sure that you can articulate things, and connecting people, collaboration. Those things are what humans do best at, and it'll stay being best at. And we, in fact, describe this as humans 2.0, right? So how we as humans can work with bots where we dump all the efficiency things to robots and bots, and we do the things that are a lot more effective and that can give outcome, not output. Output, robots can do it.
That's, I mean, AI is at heart, you could almost say at the heart of a lot of our businesses. We've been doing AI for 20 years, right? So I think just, I could also spend, it's personal interest of mine, man and a machine, and just looking at this and studying it quite heavily, but I think it's, for us, it's a big issue because automation replaces jobs. And we can't train fast enough or retrain folks for, and move them fast enough because maybe our HR processes are stale and they haven't moved. Yes, we've made massive improvements and we're doing some amazing using predictive analytics for HR too. But I think it's really scary to be sitting here and thinking of all this, and every day we are looking at coming up with examples where literally I can list 10, 15 jobs a day that I can say the next year will be replaced. And that's daunting. And I don't care what position you're in, you have to continuously read, collaborate, push people to do more. And I think where GE is investing a lot of money, a lot of time, is to provide learning opportunities for folks. Continuously learning new skills, learning technology, and then more importantly, how do you integrate that with the machine that might outsmart you in recognizing patterns or even making decisions sometimes, right? So it is empathy and negotiations and critical thinking and design thinking and all of that we need from a human perspective. But reality is that I'm seeing it in certain instances where it really doesn't matter and machine rules out, and there's about 10 jobs then that get lost. So that's a balance that we need to strike.
And there's an interesting sort of paradox that we have actually, I would say, experimented with a little bit, which is AI-based training, which is sort of paradoxical because it's AI, but it's training people for more jobs. And that really comes down to adaptive training, training that allows the training itself, or rather AI, which is trained, to adapt to the new processes or the new technologies or policies, whatever it may be, to train employees and contractors and the like to be able to be up to speed and in the grain with what the current is. And there's all sorts of different initiatives that are actually facilitating more employment on that side. But it's interesting because we look at Toptal from a very technology-focused perspective. Everything that we do, we probably look at it just like Amazon or Uber does, where we have a team of 10 engineers on, just our sign-up page to optimize for conversions, or 10 engineers, focus on how do we source people faster, et cetera. And we know empirically where all the areas are that require humans, whether that be sales, whether that be sourcing, matching, et cetera. And it's really interesting to see the few places that it's going to take to remove to have our business be completely automated. And once that happens, I mean, you will have an exponential gain in productivity, but then there are all sorts of consequences that come with that. So we're actively thinking about it, but we haven't been able to see the solutions. And as Bracken mentioned, you really have to custom tailor those solutions. While Google and Amazon and some of the others I'm sure are going to release really great AI platforms, custom tailoring those to the word, to the very specific type of business that you run is so critically important, and we haven't seen anything that's going to allow that to exist anytime soon.
These are all great comments. I'm just going to close out this discussion, and I do want to make sure that you are thinking about questions, is the next thing we're going to do. AI is really, it's a huge area, and there's so much anticipation around the impact that's going to have on people, real people. And I think it just points out, and I wanted to end on this because I think it really points out to the challenges of the future of work, which is where we began this discussion. There's no other place where there's so much hope and potential, but also so much angst and worries and tribulations around what the implications will be. I believe that this will be the biggest challenge of our leadership and culture, because when this comes in and challenges, what does it mean to be a worker? What does it mean to be a person? And I do believe that we will actually use artificial intelligence to have better empathy, to remove unconscious bias, things that hold us back from being connected to each other, because that machine will be able to look and really understand what's going on in this relationship, diagnose how that person's feeling using whatever attachments they have on their body. They could send you a little message as a leader, that person's really upset right now, and if I don't have the EQ, it'll help me be a better leader. So it's actually interesting. I do believe that artificial empathy is a key part of artificial intelligence and our future of work, how it could actually help us work better. So, right, we're going to ask some questions, and I can't even see any part of this room over here, so I'm going to ask people to just, I'm going to ask the moderators to move around with the mics and to make sure that we are getting questions. So, first question over here.
Hi, my name is Jerry. I'm working for Groupon as a director of engineering for payments. So actually, Story was with Groupon in the past. So my question is, so what's so in the current world, how does the company's perspective on leveraging freelancing and on-demand workforce going to change?
I'll take that one because we've always done that almost, right? So we've had diverse workforce. We have project-based teams. I like what Taso said earlier, that you have to have more of an open communication and platform processes to integrate freelancers in a much better way. I see that as a little bit of a problem for us because obviously there are trust issues, right? Because you have to, and some industries for us are quite protective, and we cannot have certain transparencies. And so, that's absolutely changing. We see more of, I think technology is going to increase workforce at home. People more and more across GE are requesting to have a TP at home where you can just dial in, which is great, right? So I think we see it all the time, and I think that is only going to increase. But again, I have a colleague here from HR, Heather, who can also speak to some of the details. But absolutely.
Okay. Next question. Whoever has a mic, because I literally cannot see. So Nelson, you're going to have to move around and determine who's going to be asking the next question. All right. So Nelson's your man if you want to.
Thank you so much.
Please, go ahead.
My name is Jing, and I'm from Accenture. And let me just set the stage. I have a question about culture. So let me just set the stage about Accenture. We're about 400,000 people large, and we're across 120 countries. About 75% of the global 500, they're our clients. So the long story short is, for us, failure is not something that we cherish or celebrate. However, as we all know, the new motto is fail fast, fail often. So the direction of how this trend of failing, you learn from the failure, doesn't necessarily apply squarely to a lot of the compensation models, the incentives. And I'm curious about, what are some of the thoughts that you guys have, and if there's any insights that maybe you guys can share.
I think from a job perspective, one of the biggest things that is happening is historically we thought career paths were hierarchical, and that you started as an analyst and you moved to a senior analyst, and then you moved to a manager, and then you moved to the senior manager, director, et cetera. That's history. Don't think of that, because that really should not exist. You need to move sideways, right? So you need to be able to move laterally and shuffle and dance and learn and make your mistakes this way before you go up, because you're much more employable. You've got more skills, you've got more knowledge, you've got more relationships across your business or industry. But I think, in all honesty, some cultures will not allow you to fail, right? And some cultures don't allow you to move sideways as quickly as you may want. So I think it's a delicate balance.
You know, I think if you, first of all, what is design? Okay, design is creating things quickly, rapid prototyping, dealing with constraints. So the reason why I introduced that topic, which I think Maja mentioned earlier, but design, I think the future of this is, if the solution in a big company is about design, it's about designing and redesigning instead of succeeding or failing. So, and then it's about designing or redesigning as fast as humanly possible, because the best design is the design that you learn your way through. And I think that's true with careers. I think it's true with projects for clients. I think it's true with companies. So every company in this room is a design company, whether you realize it or not. Some of you are very slow and not very good at it, and some of you are very fast and really good at it. And I think if you think of your whole career, designing your life, designing your career, designing your project, designing your, everything is design. So to me, the answer is in thinking of it that way, because then failure is not even in the discussion. It's about figuring out how to learn and rapid prototype as fast as you can.
Yeah, one thing to add to that, that's a good point. And the thing is, for us as a company, we are an innovative company. So when you're an innovative company, you take risks, and some projects fail, right? And that's okay. The thing that we do a lot is to make sure that the impact of failure is minimized, right? So if you can design so that as a consultant coming into a company, you still can take risks, and there's frameworks in place where if you fail, the cost of failure is minimal, so you can fail in smaller chunks, then you learn a lot more, right? And there's no bigger impact at the end of the day.
Yeah, and Paul Doherty, who I know quite well, and we've had many conversations, he's the CTO of Accenture, he's a very forward-looking individual. And his thoughts on technology and the way that he partners with companies, everyone just has amazing things to say about this individual, and our one-on-one conversations have been exceptional. Now the challenge is, how do you move 400,000 people? And that's his problem. And I think that's the majority of people's problems when they have to deal with an organization of that size. And to Bracken's point, teams are moving to more smaller, chunked types of work, where they're actually looking at the main sort of core employment piece, and then building not within that, but actually outside or adjacent to that, so that they could spawn off different types of innovations within the company. And we've seen that across not only types of consulting companies, but really all types of companies.
Can I add one other thing? I think you have a big advantage over most big companies, including GE, P&G, maybe us. You know, we're not that big, but we're big enough. You have a big advantage, which is you're a consulting firm. And on the one hand, I don't like consulting firms because they tend to create capability in somebody else instead of you. On the other hand, the advantage of being a consulting firm is that you tend to create teams, and then they disband and they create again. And I think if companies operated like that, big and small, where you're constantly reorienting teams, running small two-pizza teams, and then they disband and they come together, it'd be a huge
Every
improvement.
single team is an opportunity to redefine the rules again.
And low risk.
At very low risk. And so the key thing, I used to talk and preach, fail fast, fail smart all the time. I wrote a whole chapter in my book. My favorite chapter in open leadership was the failure imperative. And I have moved away from this because failure is just not an option for so many companies. It's culturally not acceptable. So I go back to what Bracken was saying. It is about learning. And when you create a learning organization, and how fast can you learn? And I put the imperative no longer about failing, about learning, and especially trading off perfection. So can we just do a little bit less perfect in order to trade off with speed? Because everybody will see the need for speed. and maybe we could make a little trade-offs here and there. And innovation and agility is all about how quickly do you make decisions without the perfect information. And that's a comfort level and a cultural issue that has to be built in. All right, we have come for maybe 2 really quick other questions. So Nelson, where are you?
You have a question?
Hi there.
Okay.
I hope I'm not too loud. This is
Okay.
Deepa Madhwan, Healthcare Innovation Leader, and a shout out to GE. My formative years were at GE Healthcare. So good to see you, Maya. I have a question for you. Can you see me?
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
see you
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah.
Light is in my eyes, yeah.
All right. So going back to what Charlene said, engaged employee. One of the keys to having an engaged employee is a healthy employee. What would you like to see as leaders around healthcare and wellness innovations at a work setting that could influence and shape up a healthy workforce in the future?
So I'm going to ask for speed responses from the team here. So
I'll just go, because we have a really big focus on that. We actually, if you go on our website now, there is just health. There's one rubric that's just about health and your own health, and we've got monitoring devices for it. And I'm the first person, and it goes a little bit to answering your question. I'm very straightforward as an individual, and I ask for what I need and what's needed from my team. And so, for example, in health and wellness in our food, we for sure have. It is no option for us to have bagels for breakfast at all. And so if you want bagels, just say it, we'll bring it to you, but this is not something readily available. So that's something that, is it everywhere across GE? I doubt that. Is it kind of a company policy? No. Company policy of kind of encouraging your employees to go run and to take care of their families, to join teams that are doing some kind of a exercise. Absolutely. It's a big kind of encouragement that we have right now. But in terms of food, I'm continuously doing it, and I think a lot of employees are starting to.
So one quick thing to add on that, for us, we expect people to take vacations, and we expect people not to answer emails during vacations. Right? It's important for health for the longer term.
I'm a big proponent of mindfulness. And just taking a break, centering, all these things. We begin our meetings with a little centering moment, just taking 3 deep breaths. Takes no time, and it makes a huge difference in getting people focused. So just there's a sense of pace and change, but if you don't take time off, and I'm a firm believer that you cannot work more than 50 hours a week, day in, day out. Sleep. Ariana Huffington has this whole entire thing about sleep. And these are all really healthy things. I also take a technology break.
Yeah.
So just sign off everything.
I'll challenge that, just so we have some controversy.
Yeah.
In an area where there can't possibly be any. How can you argue with mindfulness or sleeping? I actually think the key is flexibility. It's just letting people do whatever they want. As long as the job gets done, who cares? Who cares what you eat? Who cares how much you sleep? Who cares whether you love your job so much you want to work 80 hours a week? I mean, it comes back to what engaged employees are happy, satisfied employees, right? I mean, that's the key. And health is a part of that. And you always want to be educating people, to your point, which is helping people understand what is it to be healthy today and in the future. But so educate all you possibly can, and then give complete flexibility.
Good point. Time for one other question, Nelson.
Hi, this is Tiffany. I'm with LegalZoom, responsible for innovation and sales. I just had a quick question. I'm over here.
She's ready.
Leadership used to joke around. We always sit and talk about the fact that we're running out of young tigers. And, one of the questions we always have is, how do you fill a pipeline with talent? And so the question for the panel is, how do you find great talent fast?
What's the secret?
What's the secret?
Excellent. Has anybody figured it out?
Yeah. I want to say use Toptal, but I think that's a little too self-serving.
I think you have to create, if you're an internal organization and you're looking at your own talent pipeline, you have to create a culture of continuous learning. I think Maya talked about this earlier. One of the most important competencies moving forward is learning agility. So does the talent have the right competencies for the future? And are they learning agile? Can they keep pace with what you're going to need a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now? And you have to help them develop those skills and give them opportunities in order to quickly rise and maintain or outpace where it is that you're headed. But it takes investment, but not necessarily investment to the employee. Like, development isn't something we do to you. Right? It's a choice. So either you're going to raise your hand and you're going to work harder and you're going to build new skills and you're going to learn, or you're going to be replaced.
I think one of the reasons we moved to Boston, right, we moved our headquarters, is to be in the middle of talent. That was one of our biggest decisions, because there are all these studies and books out there that say, right, that talent is moving and congregating around certain cities, period, right? You can encourage it other places, but the reality is that people are just flocking to certain type of cities. And so we've moved there to be in a center of innovation, in center of universities, and in places where we can partner to do prototyping, to do agility, to do, to offer flexibility. So I couldn't agree with you more on that. So yeah.
And that resonates with us too. We started in Sydney, and we are pretty big in Sydney as a technology company. But we also wanted to have additional talent to be able to source different kinds of talent. So we are up in the city here in San Francisco, and also in Mountain View down south, because there are different types of talent. So we are leverage different locations for our strategy.
I'm a believer in that you got to go to the non-obvious places and just make this your number one priority. I mean, we talk about as leaders how people are the number one priority. It has to be, absolutely. And so I'm a big believer in diversity, inclusion, and belonging. And so how do you do that? How do you find the people? It's so easy to focus on the speed. I got 3 people in the pipeline. They look like everybody else in my group, so I'm just going to go with those 3 people. Speed is so important. And yet sometimes we have to slow down, because our business will be so much better if you can find a different type of voice, a different type of additive diversity, where it's not about culture fit, but culture add. And I think it's worth it to take a little bit of a time, make that investment away from our busy schedules to go to places. Like, I grew up in Detroit. Talk about a renaissance that's happening there. There's so much talent there, but we don't think about going there. I tell you, there's not a lot of competition for the talent coming there.
Our VP of sales who's here, he's actually from South Dakota. And we made a conscious decision to not recruit in the Bay Area for sales individuals, because we just thought it was unnecessary and actually unproductive. And if you watch Fargo, I don't think you're going to think of salespeople. But, he's fantastic, and he's been with us for 4 years, and maybe even 5 years now.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
And we've had a wonderful relationship. He's built a wonderful team. Talent is just not in the obvious places. It's all over the world. Some of our best engineers and best designers, they're in Colombia. They're in Argentina. They're in countries you probably only heard of once in your life. But they're out there, and they do exist.
All right, so we're going to close up with a speed round of last words of advice, thoughts. So Taso, we'll start with you and end up with Bracken here.
My general thoughts are really that companies are moving in a direction where virtual talent and remote work is not only increasingly happening, but it's more effective, and that's being proven out more and more and more. Employees are being more vocal about it. The Quartz article that just came out, which I'm sure some people have read, and the Stack Exchange data, it all supports this. And it's trending in that direction very fast. If you were to just run a simple projection, you would see it's just trending all the way up and to the right. And so, to me, that's the future. Building out infrastructure and policies that support blended workforces, I think, are probably some of the most important things companies can be doing today.
Maja.
I guess I have 2 things. There are incredibly smart people in this room, too, so I would love to talk to, just to hear what are some of the practices and how you overcame challenges to change culture, particularly in a larger organization. I think one of my just thoughts as I think through this is I like what you were saying earlier, Courtney, on how you move in a company. And I think you need courage for that, and I see it a lot in big companies like GE. People certainly don't have that courage, particularly if you've been there for a long time. That grit has been lost for some reason. And I guess because it came new, and I saw the opportunity, and I took it as a challenge that GE is announced this digital industrial, and I see it as a problem-solving capability, right, as an opportunity. So I think building people around you that believe in the same ideas and building coalition teams to go fight together for change is one of my thoughts that's coming to me. It's just really assembling teams around you versus doing something on your own.
Cool. We talked a lot about culture, and defining the culture is the easier part, meaning just putting up on the wall, but living it is the harder part. So as all of you as leaders, I guess, figure out how you can actually live your culture and make sure it's in practice, not just on the wall.
I'm going to say no regrets. So oftentimes we don't take a job because it doesn't come with money, but we all know that that bonus or that raise, you feel really good for about 2 weeks, and then you're back to being miserable. So think about those lateral opportunities and don't say no if it doesn't come with money, because it comes with something else. And it comes with exploration, and it comes with challenge, and it comes with a different experience that you'll be better off for.
I think I'll jump back to Sri's point. You know, I think the whole most important thing in culture is authenticity. You know, you can, and therefore there are things in your culture that you don't like, but they're part of your culture, and there are things in your culture that or things that aren't in your culture that you'd like to be. And I think you have to say we're not there yet. But I think just being completely honest and being whatever you are. I have my head of HR, which we call people and culture, interestingly, is she says, you know, finding your culture is actually, it's first an archaeological dig, and then it's a defining where you'd like to be after that, and I think that's pretty accurate.
Yeah, great. I'll just say one last thought, and it kind of echoes what Maja was saying, in that this defining the future of work, being a leader, takes a tremendous amount of courage. It takes a tremendous amount of confidence that you have a vision for what that is going to be. You bring your full authentic self, that you can do that. But it also requires this really interesting level of humility too, that curiosity of constantly looking for things. So as we end up, I wish you all such good luck and on a journey. This is a continual journey that we are on. We don't know what the answers are, but I hope you enjoy the journey as you embark on it. All right, thank you very much, and thank you for the panel. It's a great discussion.
Okay. This concludes our formal agenda for the evening. We'd like to thank Charlene and all of our panelists for their enthusiasm and their insights. As a small token of appreciation, we have a couple of gifts for each of you. And speaking of world-changing technology, what's in these bags is my favorite. Toptal branded earpods. And if you're a digital nomad, there's nothing better. We hope everyone's enjoyed the evening. We'd like to invite everyone to join us for our next event, which will be a webcast on May 10th that will be discussing the recent findings of an Agile talent survey that we've conducted. You'll receive details on that via email in the next couple of days. In the meantime, we'd like to invite you to stay as long as you like. We have thousands of pounds of great San Francisco sushi and farm-to-table food in the back, and lots of booze. The Toptal team will be here, and as well as our panelists, to answer any questions and get to know you further. Thank you, and good night.